Is Britain really broken? People have been talking about it being ungovernable, or is it just that we need to change the way the state works and how we go about the business of politics? My colleague Mike Martin is a former Armed Forces member. He knows what military leadership looks like. I brought him onto Politics Unchained to ask him if he thinks there are any lessons we can learn from the British Armed Forces that could be applied to our politics. Mike, when you look at the state of Britain today, what worries you the most?
I think we're going to be fine, right? That's my overriding feeling. As a country, we've got really good fundamentals. We've got educated population. I know there's a sense of broken Britain, but actually stuff mostly works. And what's really interesting is, as you travel around and talk to people from other countries, everybody's feeling this malaise at the moment. And I think part of that sense of malaise comes from, we've got all these big trends going on, like tech, and obviously the climate crisis and the transitions to renewable energy and sort of geopolitical confusion, all these other things. And they are creating this sense of discombobulation. All right, you pick up your phone and it's like, oh my God, it's chaos. And that sense of unmooredness means that people feel they don't have any agency anymore. And that, I think, feeds into this sense of like everything's broken. Actually, yes, we are having some challenges. Yes, we're having to adapt, but we'll get there, and we'll probably get there quicker than we think.
Now, that's an optimistic message, which I subscribe to. I guess also it's quite easy to feel overwhelmed, but we see and hear more stuff that we've ever done before. Globally, trends are going in the right direction when it comes to poverty, conflict casualties, those sorts of things. But what you've just described, some of the factors that are happening, AI, economic changes, international conflict, these are things which need action. We can't just sit around and do nothing and hope everyone cheers up. We need some missions. Do you think that Britain's kind of lost its ability to make things happen like that? Do we need some clarity of objectives?
Yeah, I think one of the big challenges at the moment of government is that it moves slower, necessarily, right? And I'll come back to that. But it moves slower than the pace of change in the quote unquote real world. Yeah. Tech change, climate change, all the rest of it. And there's a reason why government moves slowly in a democracy, because we want to make sure, we don't like handing power to dictators, because dictators in the short term might be able to make quick decisions, but ultimately without that positive feedback loop in democracy, they do the wrong things for society. They get to the wrong outcome eventually. And so that is the challenge, moving as fast as you possibly can, whilst within the constraints of a democratic system, which are good things, which are things that we must hold on to and take forward into this new world.
But aren't people demanding faster action already from the voting public on things like social media? Elon Musk looks and sounds pretty much like a demagogue to me. Don't we need to find a way of moving faster, or we're going to get left behind?
So yes, we always need to move faster. And I think, you and I were talking about this last night, weren't we? We were talking about what it's like being an MP in Westminster. It's a really chaotic system, and it's incumbent upon all of us as MPs and staffers and all the rest of it to lean into that system and engage with it. So I do think we do need to do that. But the other thing we need to get better at is telling a story, right? And actually, if you tell a story to, in Tunbridge Wells, to my constituents about how we got to where we are and where we're going, then people feel like they know what the direction of travel is, and that will sate, and it does sate, some of that thirst for immediate change.
Is politics like war?
Yeah, it's basically the same thing. There's an obvious difference, which is that in war, you are communicating with violence, right? You're trying to make your point with violence. You're sitting on that hilltop. Get off that hilltop. You're not listening to me? Fine, then I'm going to use violence to remove you from that hilltop. But politics is exactly the same. It's a clash of wills about what you want the society to look like.
So to win a war, is that about mission focus, objectives? Is it about that vision and story that you said? Is it about something else?
So I think in a war, and you just bear with me a little bit here, you're also trying to tell a story, right?
Yeah.
And successfully, think of Churchill, right? I mean, everyone sort of reaches for Churchill, but he's a very successful war leader. What he was brilliant at was telling the story of the war. And that meant that he was able to hold the British public together. He was able to rally the British military. He was able to create a global alliance alongside Roosevelt, and he told a story that the whole world was listening to, and that enabled groups of different people, different countries to come together to pool their military hardware and personnel and treasure and form the alliance that beat the Axis powers. And that is one of the things that you're trying to do in war. I think the second thing, which is really, really, really underrated in war and in politics, is, in war you say amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics, right? And what we're talking about by logistics is organization, getting the right stuff to the right people at the right time, right? And politics, it is a chaotic system, particularly with social media and all the rest of it. The organization that you have, if you are the most organized party and everything else is equal, you'll win, because they're not organized, which means their messaging is not coherent. They're not all telling the same story. They're not all delivering that message at volume to voters through different channels. I mean, this sounds sort of very technocratic, but the ability to create a well-functioning organization that's able to shape and narrate and tell stories in the kind of chaotic system of politics is incredibly underrated.
Well, that feels very instinctively true to me, because I look at what we're trying to say as Liberal Democrats and how it gets drowned out, and thinking, if only we could be just so much more operationalized as you described it. But does that account for the success of reform? Don't you also need an enemy in order to fight a war? And haven't reform managed to do that and win without being particularly organized, let's face it?
Sure, an enemy is always useful, right? Because we spoke earlier on about agency, right? And how that's a lot of people in the UK feel like they don't have agency, all around the world, right?
Yeah.
The other thing that people feel that has diminished in recent years is their sense of belonging, right? They sort of, as we transition rapidly through we change eras, the sense of who we are as a country, what it means to be British, all of these things are being contested and reshaped, and a sense of belonging means that there's an in-group and an out-group, right? And the out-group is the enemy. So yes, of course, in political rhetoric, it's useful to have an enemy, but I think what Farage has is charisma. He has two things. I think there's three things you need to be a political leader, right? You need to have charisma and communication skills. He's got that. You need to have organizational leadership. I don't think he has that, actually. If you look at the history of his parties, they're falling apart, they splinter, it's pandemonium, right? And you need to have a sense of what it is that you're trying to do, right? And he does have that, a politically shaped narrative and understanding, and he's got very good political smarts. So as a political leader, he's got two of the three things, right? But I think it's that last one, that being able to organize stuff, organizational leadership, that's ultimately going to come a cropper. That's going to stop him becoming prime minister.
Well, that's also, I think, comforting, I suppose, to those of us who are alarmed by his presence. But
he's a charlatan, right?
Yeah, and at the moment, reform-led councils could do whatever they can to ruin things, and people probably wouldn't notice. I think if he actually got into power, people probably would notice. I think they started to notice about
noticing. Whereas, I represent a seat in Kent, and
who's been a reform councillor since last year.
And it's chaos.
Well, just say Trump, Putin, and Brexit to Farage, and I think you'll sort of bring up some war wounds that maybe he doesn't want to talk about. But let's not talk about him too much. Let's go back to what you said about logistics and organisation, not just tactics. Do you think that part of the problem in the British state is that our institutions have become kind of too competitive for what it is they're trying to achieve? Is there enough clarity of purpose to actually get stuff to feel like it's working again a bit more?
Well, this is the kind of central charge levied at Keir Starmer, right, the Prime Minister, that he hasn't told that overarching narrative, which means that the departments of Whitehall that famously fight each other for budget and ego and all the rest of it are not pointing in the same direction. And I think that when you look at previous successful political leaders, so probably the two most successful prime ministers in the last 50 years have been Margaret Thatcher and Tony Blair, right? And they had clarity about what it is that they wanted and where they were going. And the reason that's important is that you can't decide, if you're at the top, if you're the prime minister or any kind of leader of a complex organization, you can't decide everything.
Yeah.
So you need to tell a story so that everyone in your organization understands where that organization is going, so that when your more junior leaders are faced with a decision, they don't need to refer it upwards. They go, I know what the boss would want. The boss would want that, and we'll do that.
I mean, can organizations even function without that sense of purpose?
Well, they don't function very successfully at all, right? An organization, it depends what the organization is trying to do, right? I mean, if you have a kind of small, let's say you have a small social enterprise where you don't have that clarity of leadership, it'll probably bumble along, right?
Yep.
But if you put a military unit through a combat situation without that sense of clarity about what they're trying to achieve, they'll just disintegrate.
Voters like to hear things that they believe in and agree with. That's clearly impossible. So there's a need for acceptance that some of the things as a political leader you're going to say are not going to wash very well with large proportions of the public.
Let's just challenge that premise, right? Is that true? Do voters like to hear what they want to hear? You see, I think superficially you're right. We all like to hear what we want to hear, right?
Yep.
Superficially. But actually, I think as human beings, we have a sense of what's the sugar rush and what's actually good for us.
Yeah.
And, there's the famous marshmallow test, right? With kids. When they're
yeah.
You give them, you say, here's a marshmallow now, or if you wait 5 minutes, you can have 2 marshmallows.
Yes. Yeah.
And then 30 years later,
Yeah.
they check those kids. And the ones that waited 5 minutes and took 2 tend to have better results, higher salaries, are in stable relationships, all the rest of it, right? I mean, it's an extraordinary kind of long-running data series.
Yeah.
And why do I bring that up? I bring that up because we do have a sense of humans of what's the thing to do now to get the rush.
Yeah.
We've all maybe had more hedonistic periods of our lives, right? But now all the time we make choices that are for the long term. And I have a sense that that's how people vote as well, right? They don't need to, politicians spend all their time trying to be liked.
Yeah.
Why? So they're trying to be respected, right? For your decision making and good judgment, right?
So you're saying there's actually a potential scenario in which people are blaming Starmer for literally everything, but deep down they actually still stand by their choice, that they preferred to vote for somebody a little bit anodyne but probably competent and stable.
I think everyone the Westminster gossip is all about Burnham and what's going to happen and the rest of it. I think it's underpriced that Starmer's going to remain. Yeah, right. Actually, I think that there's a good chance that he will remain, and you heard it here first.
So this is an Politics Unchained before the Makerfield by-election. Yeah, Politics
Unchained with Steff Aquarone. I think there's a good chance that he might hang around.
Very interesting. So in war, that whole agree, disagree, voter support, voter proposition dissolves in combat. And yet people still have to follow orders and do what they think is the mission objective. Mm-hmm. That has a much, much more immediate impact on people's lives, as in whether they live or die. What's that like, having to do something which you don't necessarily agree with, but knowing that it's the right thing to do because that's what the hierarchy, that's what the process has decided?
It's not the hierarchy, it's the team.
Interesting. So tell me the difference.
Team. So, what military training is war is the ultimate team sport, right? War is the ultimate team sport. And so is politics, actually. Politics is a team sport. And political parties that aren't teams don't win. Right? The public can spot a divided party, right? And they don't win. Again, there's another problem that Reform's going to have as it gets closer to the next election, right? Yeah. Because they're a collection of libertarian free marketeers, nativists, they're all these different, and there's no one doing that work to kind of bring them onto one page. Yeah. So basically what military training is, you get a group of people, you put them through grueling, unpleasant experiences, and they come out more tightly bonded, right? Yeah. And there's that interface between team bonding and leadership, right? And leadership is a service because you help your team bond, you help them overcome these obstacles, and then they see, military people respect leaders, not that they like, but who keep them alive. Yeah. right? And who achieve mission success, right?
So there's a certain amount of credibility based on past decisions.
It's the first thing I remember it. I've remembered it my whole life, and I turned up at my first unit as a second lieutenant, and the sergeant major. So, in the army, you have kind of, officers and soldiers, right? So he's a really senior soldier. He's been around forever.
Yep.
I'm a brand new second lieutenant. Technically, he calls me sir, but we all know who's the more experienced person who's got more gravitas, right? He comes and goes, sir, can I give you some advice? And I said, oh, of course, Sergeant Major. Yes. What would you like to say? And he goes, sir, it's very simple. You're not here to be liked. That's it.
That's the advice. Yeah.
That's the advice.
Yeah.
Because he'd obviously seen a procession of second lieutenants come in who felt that their job was to be liked.
I think that was incredibly important and highly analogous to Westminster politics, because even though we are, by reading of the press, hated and loathed as a profession, people don't half seem to be trying to pedal against that tide. And yet I personally feel as though so many voters would have some respect if they actually saw some trade-offs being presented. This, not this. We can afford this, we can't afford this. This is important, but it's not important enough. Those sorts of languages that help to bring it to life.
There's an infantilization.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Basically, it's nonsense.
Yeah.
And yes, it comes from. Politics is full of it's not full of. There's a decent percentage of narcissists and egoists in politics, right? And I don't say that as a kind of a negative. That's just a fact of it, right? You wouldn't put yourself
so much
through the. Yeah. It takes so much out of your life. It's so difficult for your family. Like, I have a 4-year-old and a 7-month-old, right? This is a difficult job to do, to get that balance with family life and all that. I know you've got kids as well, and you wouldn't do it if you didn't have a sense of maybe I have something to contribute, something to say, all the rest of it, right? So it's just a fact of life.
Yeah.
But I think that narcissism too often veers into trying to be liked and popular.
Yeah.
Whereas that's not the... If my friends listen to this podcast, they'd laugh at the next statement, but I have never ever tried to get people to that. It just doesn't enter my. I'm just not fussed. I've got loads of friends. I'm not in politics to make friends.
So we are literally in the privileged position of being able to do something about that, because we are elected MPs.
Yes.
What do we need to do? Do we, for instance, as bleeding heart liberals, it's very easy for us to find 1,000 good causes. Do we need to start to say, actually, we can only do these things? This is the entirety of the cost or resource available. This is in, this is out. Be much more candid about the trade-offs. Do we need to be much more radical about, say, the tax base and what we need to do to fund all this?
So the central challenge is, the first thing you've got to do is get organised.
Yeah.
Right. And stop dreaming about, well, if the political system was like this, we should do that. Here's the political system we have. It's a first past the post. It's Westminster politics. So the currency is, how many seats do you have, right? Yep. And that's just the currency, right? So play the game that you're playing is the first rule, right? Organise yourselves around winning that game, right? Which actually we did very successfully at the last election.
Yeah.
And we sort of worked out how to play first past the post to our advantage. We have a more difficult challenge in the next election, but you've got to get organised. You've got to drive high standards with your own organisation. So that's the first thing. If you don't do that, it doesn't matter how good or radical or your ideas are, all the rest of it, the public just won't even see it.
Yeah.
It just won't cut through in the chaos of the current information environment, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, you need to look in a strategic way rather than a tactical way about the transitions that the British state needs to make to get from the old era, which was Labour versus capital, trade union, we know the kind of 20th century world, to the new world, which, if you fast forward 20 years, there's two trends that are going to come together. One is AI and robotics, and the other is ubiquitous, almost free power from renewables, right? So suddenly...
Or even nuclear.
But basically you're going to have, massive, for the consumer, almost free power, without having all the geopolitical constraints around oil and all the rest of it.
Blows those geopolitical constraints out of the water.
Combined with robotics and AI, right?
Yeah.
They will combine to create, they're hugely deflationary, right? Reduces the cost of living because you'll be growing food and all the, you'll be making food in labs and all the rest of it, right? So suddenly the cost of living plummets to much, much lower than it is now.
Yeah.
So then the question is, what's the purpose? If we don't need to, for humans, then obviously we need to do some work, right? But what is the purpose of humans if you actually need to do 10 hours work a week? So that's the first question. Second question is, where does the tax base come from? Because I can tell you, there won't be any employment taxes, right? Because we'll need employment to be as cheap as possible. So the government gets most of its income from employment tax at the moment. So what's the government going to tax, right? It's a much bigger problem than where do we get fuel duty from? Fuel duty is going to disappear as an income stream for the government, right? So you need to shift that onto something else. So there's a whole bunch of strategic decisions that you need to start driving through the states to enable it to cope with this, basically what's going to happen over the next 10 years. I mean,
the need to change the tax base away from employment and towards, say, software assets and, global.
But this speaks to a bigger thing, right? Which is that so many politicians are looking backwards, not forwards.
That's
right. It's amazing. It's unbelievable. You go into the chamber, no one's talking about AI.
I know.
Right? No one's talking about AI. Everyone's talking about...
We're already seeing it, right? And that's absolutely salient. And I can see how that would translate into a story for the public, because in some extent, people are anxious about the future. They want reassurance. They want the possibility even that things might be getting better.
Our entire economic model is based on growth, right? You need 1% growth, 2% growth, which is absolutely fine. I'm very pro-capitalism. But as populations shrink, it'll probably be very good for the environment, very good for climate change, all the rest of it. So there's many good things that will come out of population shrinkage. But you have to rethink what your economic model is. And you have to rethink what your tax base is. And I don't think nobody's doing any of this big thinking in Westminster, partly because you're so... every day is so frenetic and hectic,
reactive,
right? Everyone opens the newspapers and goes, how are we reacting to what's happening? And I think, come back to what are the strategic challenges facing the British state. One is the fact that it's massively over-centralised, but the Prime Minister is governing the G7 nuclear state from a Georgian townhouse.
I was going to ask about accountability, because I get what you're saying. So we've got step one, get your house in order, get organised, get elected. Step two, hopefully not starting then, but beforehand, start thinking big thoughts about the future.